Hello Commander players, this is Jumbo Commander, and today I have a deck tech featuring Omnath Locus of Rage. So Omnath Locus of Rage is 3 red, green for a legendary 5/5 elemental with Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a 5/5 red and green elemental creature token onto the battlefield. Whenever Omnath or another elemental you control dies, Omnath deals 3 damage to target creature or player. So if we can get a lot of landfall, a lot of lands onto the battlefield, we can make an army of 5/5s, and then if something bad happens, we have an army of lightning bolts. Sounds great. Let's get lands onto the battlefield, let's play around with elementals, let's go all in on Omnath. Well, we can start off with some elementals. We know that they're going to be bolting people when they die, so let's find out what are the best elementals to include in this deck. Quite possibly, the best elemental we could ask for in this deck is Titania, Protector of Argoth. This elemental creates more elementals with land shenanigans. That's perfect. We're trying to mess around with tons of lands. We're trying to get lots of elementals onto the battlefield. This is magical. Okay. Titania can recur a land when she enters the battlefield, but whenever a land you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you get a 5/3 elemental creature token. Ooh, that's good. And so we can add a few cards that enable Titania, like say a Sylvan Safekeeper. Sylvan Safekeeper protects Titania and Omnath. Those are key creatures to our strategy, but also at the cost of a land. I mean, if we really wanted to, we could give Titania lots of Shroud and basically sacrifice all of our lands for a bunch of 5/3s. I mean, we could theoretically go all in, but it's better to have little cards that enable this strategy, like Fetch Land, perhaps. Let's say you play a fetch land. Aha! Landfall. You get a 5/5 from Omnath. Sacrifice the fetch land. Aha! You get a 5/3 from Titania. You fetch a new land. Aha! Landfall trigger from Omnath. See, it all works together really well. So I have a lot of fetch lands in this strategy because Titania and Omnath work beautifully together. Green Warden of Marasa is just like a big fat elemental Eternal Witness, which is kind of what we want. And Avenger of Zendikar is an elemental that creates plant tokens, but it's the landfall ability that we can truly abuse. We can get landfall like crazy in this deck, so just a few green plant creatures could grow into a tremendous and unstoppable army. Now, if we want to get a ton of elementals out on the battlefield, there are a few cards that really help us out. How about Tempt with Vengeance? It puts a crazy amount of elementals out on the battlefield, and each one of those could be a lightning bolt to someone's face. Or how about a little bit easier one, Spawn Rife, one of my favorite cards. It is a 2/2 with Trample, but it just keeps making copies of itself, and the copies make copies of itself. If you get this down early and one of your opponents is maybe on the back foot a little bit, you can just spawn Wraith over and over and over again. It's very fun. I think that these are 2 definite includes in the elementals section. There are a few elementals that help us control the battlefield. How about Bane of Progress? This will destroy all artifacts and enchantments, creating havoc for many of your opponents and netting yourself a huge creature. One of the best elementals out there. And Ingot Chewer, a very simple elemental. 5 mana for a 3/3, destroy target artifact. All right. But it's the evoke ability, the flexibility of this Ingot Chewer that's very powerful. For just 1 mana, you can destroy an artifact, and if Omnath is on the table, you can also deal 3 damage. Very good card. There are a few other elementals that do some excellent work. How about Stigma Lasher if your metagame has a lot of life gain in it? Or Tornado Elemental if you are, say, playing against a friend that has Brea and a lot of Thopters or Flyers. Maybe someone has a bird deck. Ooh, bird deck. Got to take that out with Tornado Elemental. Just a couple more of my key elementals. How about Fertilid? an elemental that's easy to kill itself and ramps you, this is exactly what this deck needs. With Omnath on the battlefield, Fertilid will get you 2 lands, 2 landfall triggers, die himself, and then be able to bolt someone. I mean, what else can we ask for from a card? Perfect. And how about Flamekin Harbinger? A wonderful little 1/1 that gets you any elemental you want. Green has a lot of creature tutors, and this slot could be filled with a Chord of Calling, or a green Sun Zenith, and probably be a little bit better. But, you know, let's keep our tutors flavorful. Let's search for just elementals. I think that'd be pretty cool. So if we want to go deep on elementals, there's a few different strategies that we can go. The first up, we want to look at the mana generating elementals. Incandescent Soulstoke, if you're going deep on elementals, pumps them and puts them straight on the battlefield. Smoke Braider ramps them out, and Omnath could just be a good card in this deck. Little original Omnath that helps you save your mana. It's pretty good. But let's take a look at some other elementals that we can include if we want to go deep in the elemental strategy. Charging Cinderhorn, Terra Ravager, and Malignus, all of them can do tremendous amounts of damage. This tilts the deck in a very aggressive way, including Forgotten Ancient and Undergrowth Champion that grow tremendously fast, and Rebel Hulk, which can do a ton of damage out of nowhere. All of these cards are very aggressive, very damage-dealy, and parts of this deck, if the way I'm describing it, could be a little bit more, let's play around with lands, let's get advantage out of it. So if you want to go aggressive elementals, you can add this package. Or you can kind of leave it out and go more dirtle with lands, which I'm going to describe a little bit later. But first, a few more elementals. Liege of the Tangle, Magmatic Force, and Tyrant of Discord. These are big, fatty elementals, which you can throw in if you like them. Liege of the Tangle is particularly interesting because it turns your lands into elementals, which is very dangerous, but very powerful as well. Magmatic Force is amazing in multiplayer games because it's just a bolt every single upkeep. And Tyrant of Discord is just hilarious. You can just pick someone that you want to screw over and they just have to keep sacrificing permanents. I love it. If we're going to go deep on elementals, why don't we try our market research shows that players like really long card names. So we named this card to have... No! So we made this card to have the absolute longest card name ever, Elemental. All right. We're done with the elemental section. We've covered a few that are a necessity, but a lot of them were just a little bit extra. But we are really about getting that landfall ability on Omnath going. So let's talk about all the landfall shenanigans we can have. Omnath's Landfall says you get a 5/5 elemental creature token. That's powerful, so let's try and abuse it. Zendikar's Royal also does a similar effect. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, you get a 2/2 elemental. I'd prefer 5/5, but you know, how about a 2/2 and a 5/5? Let's have them both. That's pretty good too. Or Rampaging Baloths. How about a 2/2, a 4/4, and a 5/5? I want them all. I want them all. Okay, so these are just some of the payoffs that we have when we start screwing around with Landfall. How about we take a look at one of the greatest synergies that we can have in this deck? Perilous Forays. 1, sacrifice a creature, search your library for a land card with a basic land type and put it into play tapped. Oh my gosh. With Omnath, or any of those creatures I just named, Zendikar's Royal or Rampaging Baloths, we can pay 1, get a land, sacrifice the token it just created, get another land, sacrifice the token, get another land, get another land, get another land. We can just keep getting lands out of our library for 1 mana. If we have 2 of them, we can keep generating card advantage over and over again. If we have Angry Omnath on the battlefield, we can just get 5/5, sacrifice them to do 3 damage, and do it all over again. All at the cost of just 1 mana every cycle. This is insane. Not to mention, this is just some great ramp. You know, trade in a stupid Eternal Witness that you're done with and trade it into a land. Use some of those elementals from the Tempt with Vengeance and trade them up into lands using all of these landfall shenanigans over and over again. What a combo. If we're going to have landfall, we need those land drops. Mean and Den give us an extra land drop, but also let us return lands to our hands so we can get more land drops. Azusa, lots of land drops. Oracle Moldiah, lots of land drops and some card advantage by playing off the top. And Courser of Crewfix with the ability to play off the top. Even more land drops with Exploration and Burgeoning. Not to mention the original Explorer. Let's just have sorceries with land drops on them. And also, well, maybe we might want to abuse all of these land drops with something like Storm Cauldron, where we can play an extra land drop, but also just keep getting crazy amounts of lands back to our hands. Card advantage is going to be a really important strategy in this because we're playing so many lands, we have so much synergy, we need to make sure to move through our deck so we can get to the important pieces we need. Sylvan Library is going to find us exactly what we need when we need it. And we might just draw some extra cards for 4 life. Who needs life in this game? It's ridiculous. Nissa Vital Force creates elementals out of your lands. That's exactly what we want. And if we can ultimate her by just stepping her up a few times, we can draw a card every time a land enters the battlefield under our control. That's crazy. We have so many ways to get lands onto the battlefield. We're just going to draw cards all over the place. What a great card. And speaking of drawing cards when lands enter the battlefield, how about a Tireless Tracker? This gives us a clue token whenever a land enters the battlefield, and then we can wait and crack those whenever we want. Some of the best card draw are the wheel effects. Wheel of Fortune and other effects like it can be very powerful in this deck, specifically because when we're throwing things into our graveyard, that's not the end of them. We have tons of abilities to recur them, and drawing 7 cards for 3 mana is crazy good. And we're going to have the mana ramp in order to use those cards better than our opponents. Speaking of which, let's do something very similar with Chandra's Zero ability. Discard all cards in your hand, then draw that many cards +1. Fantastic. But wait a second, Chandra also creates elemental creature tokens, so we can be on elemental theme too. Again, Nissa and Chandra, what perfect planeswalkers for this strategy. Now I mentioned some recursion. If we're going to be throwing some lands away, maybe throwing some cards in the graveyard from our Wheel of Fortune, we need to be able to get this back. And this is also very closely tied to our card advantage category. Green Warden Marasa is something I mentioned earlier, but also Tilling Treefolk can get lands back, and Eternal Witness is a classic. Creeping Renaissance can get a lot of stuff back to your hand. Praetor's Cancel gets everything back to your hand. I love this card. And Season's Pass gets you a selection of things back to your hand. This deck is very land heavy, land centric, so Crucible of Worlds. Recursion by playing your lands from your graveyard. Oh, magnifique. Also, Petrified Field, a one-off. Play a land from your graveyard. Pretty good. Splendid Reclamation. Play all of your lands from your graveyard, like a one-time Super Crucible. Love it. And Life from the Loam. This is the workhorse of the deck. It gets things in our graveyard and gets them out of our graveyard. Wonderful. This deck is all about the lands, so let's talk about a few of them. First up, we need to talk about ramp. There are a lot of ramp cards that we can put in here, and I have a ton of them, Cultivate, Kadama's Reach, Farseek, but I want to talk about just a few. Tempt with Discovery is over the top great because it can get you whatever land you want, and oftentimes you can tempt your opponents to be a little bit greedy and give you a huge advantage. Realms Uncharted can get you some lands that you need, but also gets you lands in the graveyard. And we've seen from the recursion section that those won't stay there very long. We can get them back again. So again, a great card that will allow you to diversify your deck with great lands. Not to mention, Crop Rotation gets you whatever land, Sylvan Scrying gets you whatever land, and Expedition Map gets you whatever land you want. Dust Bowl can kill your opponent's lands, but then get your land in the graveyard and then you can play it back again with all those recursive spells. Oh, amazing. Not to mention a classic Strip Mine. Yavimaya Hollow is that important protection element that I said we needed, because we have a few creatures that are very critical to this strategy. Also, Winding Canyons is very important in terms of safety because it lets us flash out our creatures right before we untap and have a crazy turn. Ghost Town is very interesting. It's a land that just taps for a colorless mana, but for 0, you can return it to your hand. Now, why would we want a land that goes back to your hand? Well, so we can play it again. We want landfall triggers, and so Ghost Town can be a landfall trigger every single turn. You can't use it more than once a turn because you have to activate this 0 ability only during another player's turn, but that doesn't matter. A built-in landfall every single turn is great. Not to mention, Gruul Turf gets a land back to your hand, Jungle Basin and Dormant Volcano all get lands back to your hand so you can keep playing them. And we have the cards to support this strategy. We have the Azuzas and the Explorations and the Burgeonings so that we can... Oh, Burgeoning Ghost Town? Oh man, no. Anyways, we have the strategy that can enable these land drops. Now there are a ton more lands you can add. I say pick your favorite lands. Pick the lands that fit your meta really well. Pick the lands you have. Lands can be kind of expensive, especially specialty lands. So find whatever you want and put it in and experiment with it. That's what makes this deck really fun, I think, is the ability to have a lot more playable cards because your lands are so integral to this strategy. But I have a special surprise for you. This deck is even better than you thought because it's really 2 decks in 1. I want to introduce to you Borborygmos Enraged. If you go a little bit light on the elementals and go very heavy into the land recursion, land bouncy strategy, you can have Borborygmos Enraged as your second general, your lieutenant, or you can just switch it out and put him in as your general sometimes. Or just have like kind of a second deck in one deck. Borborygmos has a lot of the same synergies, and I'd say all you need to really add to make him crazy good is a Keen Sense and a Snake Umbra. I mean, obviously you can customize him a little bit better, but a lot of the core pieces, the important cards, are exactly the same. So you can have 2 cool Gruul land-based decks in one. Build this deck, please. All right, everyone, that was Omnath Locus of Rage. And I think it's a super fun deck with a few different angles, going crazy with elementals, really going crazy with ramp. And that's what makes this deck so powerful, is that a lot of decks in your playgroup, in your meta, won't be able to keep your ramp in check. And so you can just keep playing more and more powerful spells faster than all of your opponents. I want to thank you all for watching. This has been Jumbo Commander with a new deck tech. If you like this deck, please consider liking the video or subscribing to my channel or shooting me a comment. Thanks guys, I'll talk to you later.